So,
like, I only see you ever when you're in business. Last night, I was watching that tour. Last night, that like a best friend of mine, they were here like at my table and doing conference and I was like, last year, when I was saying, they like played around and walked off, and I was like, meeting coming out feelings, like, because I never forget faces or names. Yeah, I don't either. I feel like if I see like they don't recognize me, then I'm not so like a weird person to be like, hey, what's up? Maybe we can't recognize you. Yeah, I have that issue. If I know the names and faces, I'm just like, I'm just like, you better just get me faces otherwise.
If they keep in,
Well, now you know. If I ignore you,
that was bad. Wait.
really? That's why I always make sure to go first thing by email.
Yes. Yeah, we have to take it. Okay.
We're gonna do the over the table content.
Me too. Congratulations. That meeting
I heard after the motion to separate, motion to combine, motion to separate and recombine. That's what I heard.
Looking forward to this all.
Right.
I got out of class. I just stuck it out. For 2 hours, I could the last time I tried to eat plain, I forgot.
No, I work. It would be. I think it'd be really cool. I'd love to put freaking have it on my door. Yeah, that'd be great. But I couldn't. It wouldn't make sense. I'm actually working tonight at the boss
Just like looking at your burgers, like, I'm not gonna play with you. I'm not gonna be sneaky. No shame. Just like, no, dude, I'm super.
You know, I was kind of like, my classes are like colder. Like in my military classes, they're all getting ready to be active dude. My weather classes, they're all getting ready to be
Oh, I did.
tough projects, tough papers. But it's nothing that you guys have to do. Kind of
I do too, which is also because I'm like, whatever your question is, what sucks is, you may actually have that question, and you could ask it after class. I don't understand.
Which one is it?
Like, I think about that one person who's like, we're all listening, you have any questions, because I know when it's question, you let out like half an hour early. And then people ask me, they'll ask questions like, you and then, we're two opposite. I'm pretty sure you do it. Or even you, so that's like, what's not to ask. Sorry, no, or like, for some reason you don't, you're talking to the teacher, like, I'm gonna do better, but they're supposed to be here this time, so it's like, I talk about like this theory.
Howdy! Howdy! We're about to begin our finance committee meeting. We have our special guest today, Dr. Loftin. The major focus of this meeting is to talk about tuition and fees, in particularly about the university advancement fee. Students started seeing it on their bills. You might have seen on Facebook people talking about what the university advancement fee is. aka the student success fee. So we're gonna talk about all those things: tuition fees, anything university finances related are things that the committee was instructed to build questions on. We also have administrative support to help Dr. Loftin answer the questions here.
I needed patents.
The Finance Committee voted to grant speaking privileges and invitations to the meeting to the speakers of the Senate, Scott Bowen and Mariana Fernandez, and also to SVP John Caybrook and Michael Apple. I don't think they'll be able to join us tonight. And we're going to print the agenda, so I'll go ahead and brief over it. We have our committee sitting at this side of the room. We will begin with open forum, then we'll move on to question and answers with Dr. Loftin, then we'll conclude the Q&A, and the Finance Committee will review legislation that we have on in committee. And after that, we'll adjourn the meeting. But you are welcome to stay for the whole process, but the Q&A will conclude, and then we'll move on to legislation. Also, we have a question box over here, so after open forum, we'll just limit it to any student who wants to speak their thoughts, not to Q&A. If you have a question, please drop your question in this question box, and a committee member and I will be looking out to any questions that are submitted. With that, we're ready to begin open forum. Are any students here interested in sharing their thoughts about tuition fees?
I'm confused about the fee that you mentioned does. What is it, like, where do those funds go?
The university advancement fee?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and ask that question for you in the committee.
Oh.
And any other students interested in? Okay, with that, we'll conclude open forum, and we'll move on to question and answer. So please drop off your questions in the question box, and we'll go ahead and now move on to questions that the committee will ask.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be able to say a few things about the history of this, if I could. And while we're doing that, maybe questions can be formulated. First of all, howdy.
Howdy.
I appreciate the chance to be here tonight. Tuition and fees are always interesting topics. And we want to make sure that all your questions are answered. I've asked tonight to have two great Aggies with me here. Ms. B.J. Crane, to my right here, is our Chief Financial Officer. And by her is Ms. Deborah Wright, who is our Chief Budget Person. And so between the two of them, we can handle most questions here. They've been here a while, and they know how this place really works financially. Let me just give you a little background, and then we'll be happy to answer all the questions you have. We have historically here involved students heavily in the input that goes into making decisions on tuition and fees. When I became president, I inherited what had been in place for several years. That was two different committees. A committee that was called the TPAC, the Tuition Policy Advisory Committee, and also a Student Fee Advisory Committee. So two different committees. One looked at tuition, both at fees, and they were heavily student biased. So TFAC had a majority of students, for example, on it. So it was clear that students were able then to get their voice heard very readily as far as their concerns about tuition and fees. So I thought about this a long time. My first couple of years as president, decided this past year that having two separate committees dealing with fees and tuition independently was probably the best way to do it. So I decided to put together these two committees into one committee called the Tuition and Fee Advisory Committee, or TFAC. And that's what operated this past year. So it's money. It's money you're spending. And so putting it in two different pots and discussing it is probably not the best way to do business. So we decided to put this committee together. And the committee, again, had a majority of students, the voting members, the minority of others, faculty, staff, administrators who were who were on the committee, plus a few advisory non-voting members as well. Let me just give you a recap of those couple of years. Last year, 2 years ago rather, the process then resulted in no tuition increases at Texas A&M, but there was a fee increase in some areas. At that time, we were going into a fairly uncertain period. This was now the fall of 2010, and the session that next spring resulted in a rather substantial reduction in our budget. We lost almost $40 million per year of state support. Now, state support was primarily used to pay the salaries of faculty who teach you and some of the staff who support the academic mission here at Texas A&M. The people you talk to as advisors, the people you meet with, the people who help the laboratory setups, this sort of thing, were all affected by this. We're a very people-heavy operation. That's what key thing to remember. So we were faced with a great deal of difficulty in keeping the enterprise that educates you operating at the same level without much loss of revenue to the state. At the same time, we'd already made a decision not to increase tuition. And so we were caught in a perfect storm in a sense. We went through a very thoughtful and thorough reallocation of funding. We first of all looked at how to reduce our need for state funds to address the reduction we had. And one example of what happened on that is we elected to offer to very senior faculty, people who were at an age where they could retire, a incentive to retire then and not later. And so 115 faculty took advantage of that, which saved over $15 million a year of salary dollars. So that was just one major chunk that helped us get that $40 million, almost $40 million of loss we had. So we went through as much as we could, and we were able to reduce quite a bit our reliance on state funds in a way that we thought minimized the impact on you. But that wasn't enough to really, again, make it all right. So we then went through a second exercise, reallocation of non-state dollars. And our target was to find $21 million in non-state money we could reallocate. And that committee worked really hard and made some major progress in that. There was one major problem we couldn't solve, and that was when it comes to fee dollars, which you pay part of it of, we could not, in many cases, reallocate those to anything else but the specific purpose that they were collected for. So on your fee bill that you get each semester, you'll find tuition listed there, two lines for tuition. You'll find, in the past, you have found 16 mandatory fees that all of you pay. Then you have found other fees that were your unique fees for you, what courses you take, what programs you're in, or you're in actually determine what fees you pay. So you have kind of three things going on. You have tuition, both state, and also it's called designated tuition. You then have the 16 mandatory fees you all pay. Then each of you had a collection of fees that was different for every person depending on what mix of courses you were taking, what majors you were in, and things like that. So that's what your fee bill looked like, pretty long bill. And we were just simply unable, statutorily, to reallocate many fees to other purposes we thought were more important than what the fee was collected for. And that was a fundamental problem we had in terms of making the experience you have here the best it could be, education. So I proposed the idea of the Board of Regents to allow us more flexibility to manage your fee dollars better. The idea was to collapse most mandatory fees into a single new fee that had less constraints on how it could be spent in terms of where it went to the university. And then to use the university community, including you, to look at reallocating those fees in a very, very careful way to make sure we maximize the impact of the education we had, perhaps taking away other things that weren't quite as important. And so it's really a prioritization issue. So this past May, the Board of Regents accepted that point of view and authorized this new fee. At the same time, they made a minor adjustment in two of your existing fees, then your IT fee and your library fee. Those are fees that are usually very important to you because you depend on Wi-Fi and other support here on campus quite a bit, and you depend on the library and its resources quite a bit as well. So there was an increase for this fall, $43.58, based on those two fee increases. Otherwise, we took 13 of those 16 fees and made them into one fee with no change in the amount you pay. And so that was key. There was no net revenue increase to us, except for the small amount I mentioned. But we now have a fee which we have fewer constraints on how we spend. And now I have the ability to go to you and faculty and staff and ask the question, what are our priorities? Where can we spend the money most effectively to get our mission accomplished here at Texas A&M? And that, I think, is going to give me the management ability to do a better job with the money we have available and minimize the need to increase the cost moving forward. That was all about trying to keep you where you need to be in terms of education and perhaps sacrificing a few areas we felt were not as important, such as you felt. So that's that, and I will certainly answer questions about that. What I want to mention before I close is simply how we're going to go about allocating this new fee. I'm creating a strategic budgeting council, and this council is modeled after an existing council we have here called the Council of the Built Environment that is organized in two tiers. There will be sub-councils that focus on certain areas, with an umbrella over that really analyzes the results of the sub-council debates, recommendations, to funnel to me final recommendations. So this council will have in it a number of students, some faculty, and some staff, and some administrators. So we actually get a good mix across the entire university and be able to have them fit it into the sub-councils effectively. So we're going to keep the TFAT we've had before, which is again student dominated, and that will be one of the three sub-councils of this new council. And they will do what they've done before. They will be the ones to look at the current level of tuition and fees, recommend to me any possible changes that they feel appropriate based on the data they're given. Another group, by the way, that sub-council will have 8 students and 7 others as voting members. So 15 members, 8 of which are students. So it's clearly a student-led committee. There'll be 4 advisory non-voting members on the council as well, but they won't be able to vote. They'll simply be there to provide support for the overall sub-council. Another group will be the Student Service Fee Advisory Board, which is the current student fee advisory group we have right now. That's within Student Affairs, which many of you may have been a part of in the past or just know about anyway. That's 9 people, of which and they're all students basically. There are 5 appointed by the Student Senate, 4 by me. So that's an all-student committee right there. So we have 2 councils. I've described now one of which is a majority, 8-7 majority of students. Another is all students basically. The final group, sub-council, making up this larger group, will be a reallocation sub-council. That will be the one to really look at the prioritization issues here. That's where the rubber meets the road, basically. There'll be 3 students on that committee. So you'll have not a majority, but a sizable number of you on that committee to work with. It'll also have 1 dean on there. There'll be 1 department head on there, 2 faculty, 1 staff person, and 3 administrators. And so this committee will be, I think, receiving the most attention because this job is going to be to very thoughtfully look at the university's needs, your needs specifically, and filter up to the larger council on the top of this that's comprised of these pieces, the recommendations they'll chew over in terms of where the money be allocated. So I've done right now is I've taken the fee that you're paying right now, we call your expensive fee, all of it's gone, where those fees went last year. We've made no changes whatsoever to the allocation of fees so far. I'm waiting for this council to begin working, and they'll be the one recommending in the future reallocations as appropriate of this new fee to different operations here at Texas A&M. So, just to give you a little example of that, let's look at a few of the fees. You have, for example, a student service fee. That fee is rather sizable. That fee is $14.97 per credit hour. So about $15 a credit hour. So if you're taking 15 hours, you can see how much that is. It's pretty solid money. It's pretty solid fee for you. That goes to fund things like this, what you're doing right now. So we have to weigh that kind of fee application against the library, or IT. Whereas before they were all separated, I couldn't move money from one to the other. They're now all drawn from one pot. And we have to decide year to year how much we take from the pot for each major operation we have to speak of. It'll be hard work. It'll take a lot of time, I think, to really understand this. And we want to have some continuity. We'll try to look at 2-year overlapping terms. So students will be there for 2 years. To have a roll-off each year, half of them, so you'll be able to have some continuity. So your learning in year 1 can carry on to year 2 if you're on this particular council. So that gives you a sense of how we're going to do this. There are many more details I can go into if you want to, but I'm just trying to give you a flavor for, again, why this fee was put forward. It was really for management flexibility, to be able to squeeze the best we could out of every dollar we spent. And we want to make sure that you have a major role to play in advising me on how this money is actually allocated to carry out operations. Now, the 3 fees are left alone that still are in place. Most of those fees are the fees that are associated with the rec center, with the student center, and with health. Those fees are statutory. They're fees created, or at least the process of creating is based on legislation. And you voted on those fees at some point in the past, and you control those fees in terms of your ability to stop their increases if they go beyond a certain level. And so those fees weren't touched because of their statutory basis. But the other 13 fees and 16 do not have such a basis. And so those are the ones we just folded together. So again, your total increase based on these fee changes from year to year was less than $44 a semester. And no tuition was increased at all in the last 2 years. So we tried our very best to keep your costs at a minimum. But I don't want to sacrifice the quality of your education experience here at Texas A&M. That's the problem. And that's where I need your help. To be able to help us be thoughtful and careful about how we really allocate these dollars, these scarce dollars, to the operations you care about at Texas A&M. So that's my statement. Fernando, I'll be happy now to let the questions drive the train where you want to go.
Okay. Do you have any members that would like to question? Go ahead.
You want me to start? Sure. Okay. Hi, Dr. Loftin. I appreciate you coming here today. And I just had to start off a question about the student success fee. I've heard some things that it may not necessarily be legal to combine all those fees into one. And so I'm just wondering, what you feel about that. If you feel that this is within the parameters of the legislation, if this is still going to be transparent, if the university is still going to be accountable to the students on how they use these fees, if it's all thrown into one pot.
First of all, I'm a lawyer, so I'll be first to say that. Our general counsel has spent a great deal of time working on this. They only sent me a memorandum certifying the legal sufficiency of this fee, which means, in their opinion, this is a group of lawyers' opinion. What we've done so far is completely within the context of the statutes. So that's all I can tell you. I'm a lawyer, I can't practice law, so I can't overrule that. Obviously, there could be a court case, somebody could sue us, that was on the course to try this particular matter. Legislature could come along and pass a law which made it clearer, perhaps redirected things in some way. That could all happen. But right now we're operating under the fact that we have a legal team here at Texas A&M that indicated to us that what we've done so far is within the statutory authority the Board of Regents has. So that's the first question. The more important question to me, which you asked, was really about transparency. 2 forms of it. First of all, this council will provide you, the students, a form in which you're intimately involved in the decision making about where this money goes. That's number 1. Number 2, we want to be transparent. So we've been working for a long time to provide financial data that you can access that makes it clear to you where money goes. And we can do more on that as time goes on. We have more ability to manage that reporting process in ways you find appropriate, we will do that. So we're happy to have your questions come to us about where the money might be going to make sure you are getting the answers you need about that. BJ, you want to add anything about that? We're trying our best to be transparent here.
The only thing I want to add to what President Loftin has just said is it's a little bit of a nuance in that we didn't combine all the fees into a new fee. We created a brand new fee under a very flexible section of the Education Code. And it gives the president of the university basically full flexibility on how those fees may be allocated. At the same time, we completely eliminated 13 fees that were created under very specific fee statutes in the Education Code that said, this dollar must go toward this purpose. And so with Dr. Loftin's explanation earlier, we found ourselves in this, a little bit of a conundrum with trying to be able to equally do reductions across the board, but some divisions and areas had fees that were so restricted, when they try to reduce and put it back into this central pool to reallocate, we couldn't do it. And so, like I said, it's a little bit of a nuance, but just understand that we didn't take all of these as they stood and move them to a new fee. We completely eliminated those. We eliminated their legal citations and their legal requirements, and we created a brand new fee under a more flexible fee citation in the Education Code.
Let me emphasize what Peter said about the motivation here. We were faced with a situation that we thought was very, very problematic. We lost money that directly benefited you. The state funding we got directly benefited you. The fees, we had areas of this university, we had to let faculty go, we had to reduce faculty, like I said earlier, by having this voluntary retirement program. We had to reduce staffing in many places that affected you directly. Other areas which were fee-driven had no impact at all. They weren't touched. That was just unfair to let parts of the university, which are important certainly, but not as important as your education, go untouched, while other parts that affected you in your education directly cut in a large amount. That's what was happening. And we just felt we had to be more equitable about how the money was utilized across the university that you paid. That's what it came down to. So again, we just corrected her assessment or her statement about the way this is handled legally. I'm not a lawyer again, but we're certain, at least our council is certain that this was done in a way that fits statutory authority currently available to our organizations. And if you want to meet with some of the attorneys, I'll be happy to make that available to you as well.
I have a question. One of the emails that we got from the student business services, I quote, it says, great news, student tuition fee statements will have a cleaner, simpler beginning this fall. Personally, I'm more concerned about knowing where my student fee money is going than about how clean my tuition bill gets. Don't get me wrong, I'm still concerned about a clean tuition bill, but my idea of a clean tuition bill is one that doesn't overcharge students. So, my question is, how is this council going to, how do you justify requesting fees for, say, the IT department or for the library, for the fees that are included in the university advancement fee? How do you justify requesting money for a certain thing and then using it for something else?
Well, right now we're using the money we're receiving for exactly what it was originally requested for under previous minimum fees we've had. The council is all about having the units of the university who are fee funded come to you as a council and explain to you what they need to be able to provide services with. And it'll be the council's ability to decide how much they will buy. So if we are currently allocating X amount of dollars to the library, and Y amount of dollars to IT, just as two examples here, it'll be up to the library and the IT departments to come to you and tell you they need so much money to provide and level of services for you. And we have to you to decide how much level of service you want to buy. It's more important to have this change in the IT services you have, or more important to have this change in library services. Just two examples. I don't think it's going to be simple, easy, but it will force every unit to do what they haven't necessarily done before, which is to not simply stand independently before you and say, I need this more dollars for IT. We have to say that in the context of everyone else saying the same thing. So truly, the ability to make priorities happen, which hasn't been the case before necessarily. Each fee was looked at all by itself by previous committees that made this advisory recommendation to the president. And now there was not necessarily the ability to look at fees being lowered on the one hand, to raise fees elsewhere, to keep the sum the same basically, or to decide that we needed an increase across the board and distribute that in some particular way that makes sense in terms of the priorities the council has involved. So it's all about making choices. You make choices every day. When you go and spend money, you're making choices. But in the fee situation, you were making choices, putting your money in individual bins, and that money will stay in that particular bin. If over a course of time, that bin's purpose became less important than bin's purpose, there was no way to take the money out of that bin and put it over here where it belongs. That's the problem. And so I think we're trying to give you a lot more ability to tell me what's important to you than you had before.
We have
No, thank you.
question, committee. That's all.
I'll go and throw in here. So it seems like this university fee money can be allocated to basically anything that the committee or the committees decide it needs to go to. And so how is that different from tuition? So if you've got tuition in one, I guess you've got two bins now that we pay into it, counting the rec center and those other mandatory fees and then differential tuition. But if you've got tuition and the university advancement fee, what is the difference between those two?
It's not a lot of difference, quite frankly. Let me give you a history here. When I was a new faculty member, there were very few fees. The state controlled tuition levels were quite. So the state legislature would meet every 2 years and rarely they would increase tuition. Universities were unable to really do their jobs and really struggling to be able to hire faculty, to deal with expansion of enrollments, to be able to handle the day-to-day operations they had to carry out. And so this very statute was used to create a fee, and it was called the buildings fee actually. And little to the village was created basically to form the ability to give the universities on a year-to-year basis an ability to actually make things happen in terms of the revenue that they have to operate. What's different now is I don't believe there was ever any, at least in my universities, there was never any allocation process that gave students any insight into where that being done. So this is a kind of a reprisal, if you will, that was done back in the 70s. That was a result of a zero tuition increase for many years for part of state institutions here. At a time when both inflation took place as well as enrollment. I'm not happy with that process because it was a black hole. It was a black hole which you couldn't discern the money. So what I was putting in place here, I thought was that same process in a way, but adding to it the council, which provides, in my opinion, great transparency and great input for all of you to be able to have a sense of where the money should go as far as the first priority, second priority, third priority. Because weigh different things that you have to get your life here manageable. You take care of all the pieces of the university that you take advantage of. And be able to put some thought in which is more important. Is it more important for you, to have a bursar's fee, whatever that is, whatever it is, or a fee associated with fighting Wi-Fi? Those are the kind of choices you haven't really had before, except taking very discreet, taking one at a time and saying, you know, the IT people are justifying spending more hubs to the servers, they're spending more Wi-Fi access points to the campus. It's going to cost some money. You made that choice singularly right there, and I believe that strategic increase or not, in the TFAC or the fee advisory committee appreciated that. You weren't weighing that against a fee applied to something else. So you weren't really, you were choosing, making choices only based on single purposes. That's not how life is. Life is about looking across what you have to live. Food, gasoline, housing, education. So we're trying to make this a much more human-like approach to how we manage our own budgets, our own lives than we had before. And through this, the goal is complete transparency to you, that you know exactly where the money goes. So right now, we've changed nothing about the fee allocations as far as the actual operations. The budget started this year exactly where they would be. It was, both fees were still there. No change at all. And I won't change those until this council is operational and provides input to me about what the priorities need to be. That's where we are right now. Tuition is more flexible in some respects. There's still some limits on this fee statutorily. It does not replace tuition exactly. It is a fee within a particular statute or section of the education code for Texas. And so there are some specific parameters that guide it. Because you won't add into that at all. It's not exactly tuition. It has some of the flexibility tuition has.
Where exactly under the statute, so like, if I were to look through the Texas Education Code, where exactly would I find this, like the authority to create this for the community?
Section 54 is where and then 55. So in those two, that's where all these statutes are.
The private fee statutes sometimes can be created in very, very unique purposes in one institution.
I have another question. Currently, we have the state mandated student service fee advisory board, and a concern that Student Senate has discussed in the past is that the board is not directly elected by students. So it's intended to represent students in the tuition, in the fee process, but it's not elected by students. So would you be supportive of legislation to grant the recommendation authority that is currently given to staff and transfer it to the student senate, student government of the institution, the Texas A&M?
I was trying to study that. I'm happy to hear your thoughts about that. The current makeup of this advisory committee is a chair that's selected, it's a student selected by a joint committee comprised of the current student body president, the speaker, the previous student service fee advisory board chair, the grad student council president, and a rep from the office of VP of Student Affairs. That's the current committee that selects the chairman. Okay, so that committee gets together and decides who they want to be the chair. Then there are 5 students coming out of the student senate. Okay, that's out of 9, so the majority come out of the senate already. We're talking about the senate. 4 are appointed by the president of the university. It's me, and so that's the current makeup of this committee. I'm happy to hear any advice from the Student Government Association as an official that suggests alterations. I don't guarantee I'll accept that, but I'm happy to hear that. Again, I believe the statute simply specifies it must be a student committee. It doesn't tell you how to form the committees that are right these days on election inspections that. So we have some freedom here to be able to decide differently how the committee is comprised. The only requirement of the law is it must be all students. So again, if you have legislation that comes forward, I will take to consider that and take it very seriously. But not knowing what you would do, I can't necessarily automatically approve.
So how do you pick the other 4 students? Because it says the president picks the 4 other students on the committee, so how are you picking the other 4?
I haven't picked any for a while. You recall, BJ, how we did last time?
We work with the president.
I think it's maybe fair to
There's an application process, we delegated it to the vice president for 2 years, and there's an application process, a very rigorous application process.
I can put in there. Usually what has happened is there are 5 students appointed and confirmed by the Student Senate. They're actually appointed by the same board that chooses the chair. So the speaker, the SVP, the vice president of the student affairs office, I believe it was Tom Reaver who participates in that. And the graduate student council president and the new chair of the board choose the 5 recommendees. And then usually what has happened is that your office has nominated the returning members of the board. So, I don't think anyone has made it onto staff without coming through the Student Senate for many years.
That was my sense, there was a fair amount of decision making at some point, that's what it was. I haven't messed with that in quite a while. We've seen it like broke, we would try to make changes. The key thing, I believe, is the degree to which students have a chance to become familiar with all the information that goes into this and can spend enough time there to be effective. So they're not just walking in, spending a short time there walking out, they spend some time getting into this, learning all about how this works, getting all the data in place, becoming familiar with it so they can actually make good decisions. So we haven't tried to mess with that, in my understanding.
So as a matter of fact, I think staff they have a learning session tonight, an education session that went on, it started at 6 o'clock tonight, so they have an education.
Well, that's where the designing things out, actually.
Chris? Yep. Yeah, so I'm just going back to some parts of the student success fee, kind of a 2-part question. So I know she mentioned that now that we have the student success fee, the other 13 fees that were formerly part of the student success fee that we're now kind of put into one pool. Just for clarity, that those are gone. Those will not come back as long as we have the student success fee. Is that
that's the board's direction to me. That's a board decision.
Okay. And the second part of the question is, I would just like a more, maybe if you have a more specific way to let the students know where their money from the student success fee is going. Like, will we have a budget emailed out to people where, this is where your student success fee is going? Or do you have any specific ideas?
We can certainly do something. Have a website location where you can go and look at the allocation from that fee to each unit that gets it. We can do that very easily, I think. We can mail it out too. I suspect mails aren't as good as some other ways of doing it. I'll take your advice on that. Whatever you think would be a good idea. We're happy to make sure the information is made available. But right now, as I said, nothing has changed year to year. There is a website where the budget is available at the university, but it's rather big and hard to find things in there. So it'd be pretty straightforward to get just a single page that would show the current allocation of that fee to specific units at the university. And then as that changed year to year by virtue of the advice given to me by the council, we can update that easily. That's pretty handy, I think. We can have a very simple place to go to. Right now, if you go into the university budget, to find all the pieces becomes a little bit of a challenge unless you're familiar with it. So we're probably better off giving you a new form that says, here's what the money is going for those particular years you get fees directly. Now, I wouldn't necessarily include there the other fees that are in place that are very specific fees, like the course fees you pay and things like that. But these 13 fees, which you no problem for us until you have a single site that you go to at any one moment in time, on exactly what the fees are.
Okay. When would the students be able to see that? Would that be something that could start like at the end of this semester that y'all could get going on?
Well, a bit depends on how, right now, we can tell you right now what it is. We've already done this, again, based on last year's approved budget. We've already done the allocation fees right now. I will hope to have this council in place fairly soon. I just published this week to the university community this particular structure, and I'll be looking for nominations from various groups, students, faculty, and staff to be populated now. Hopefully, we're operating for the end of the month, and so we're near the end of the month. We're first October, and I will give them a charge, and I will look to them to tell me how fast they can move. I'm willing to accept some recommendation for changes in this rest of the year if it's thought to be appropriate. It's a little tough because these people are paid these things like that. So I'm not trying to be move so fast we do draconian things. we need to begin moving the university in the right direction. We're worried about, again, starving the educational enterprise of the university in lieu of having other things that are fully funded right now, not at all affected by the reduction we've gone through in the last 18 months. So if the council believes it can make good recommendations, I'm willing to receive some in the spring semester and begin making suggestions then. But I'm willing to wait also next fall if we have to make sure we have adequate time to do a good job. This is all about doing it quickly, doing it well, and making sure everyone knows what's happening so we don't have any lack of transparency. So again, it'll be depending on how fast the council believes it can really move. I don't want to try to push you to move prematurely and make decisions too quickly. And we've had mistakes made because of that. But I think we can have almost immediately a website showing where the current application is going, which is already the approved budgets we've had in place for quite a while. And then once that's changed, we can update that appropriately in real time.
I have two questions from the audience that I'd like to ask. The first one is, will the committee meetings be open to the public?
That's my opinion.
And
I see no reason it shouldn't be.
And the second question, I'm going to ask that question on behalf of the student in the audience, and then I'm going to add something to it. The question is, why is the student computing services fee required? I understand the use of buying computers and laptops for OAL labs. That these students can easily buy their own laptops if they save money for it. Sorry. Says, here's my thoughts. The fees buy the more advanced computers and desktops, but those orders for Dell doesn't exactly come in within 2 or 3 months. Within that time, though, it's good enough to upgrade already. Isn't there a better system? What I wanted to add is something more regarding the first statement, which is why is student service be required for all students? And in the last week's Senate session, when I spoke with former student body president Jim Pickering, we were talking about the writing center fee, and we discussed how it's not largely used by too many students. And I think the question that got him to change his mind on whether he was going to support or oppose the fee was when I asked him, have you ever been to the writing center? To which he said no. So my question attached to this question would be whether it is necessary for all students to pay for a service that only a few students use. And then maybe you can add to this question.
Well, let me go back. I think the first question you asked me, the student, was about computer. There are actually 2 fees, I'm sure I have the right data here. We have a computer access fee, which is a credit hour, and we have a software license that includes that credit hour. Those 2 fees together are used together in some respects. I would say that buying computers is probably the least piece of that budget. The real cost of this goes into maintaining a network here for staff to be access to the World Wide Web and everything else you go to. That's where the real, I think, the largest piece of the money for these is fees for access, about accessing the internet, not about buying computers. There is some money spent on buying computers for the common labs, and we do believe it's important to make sure every student has access to that. Some folks come here on a very limited budget and maybe unable to afford a computer of necessary power. There's also software that has quite stringent licensing requirements on it that requires to control the computers that actually have that proper owner. And that's one of the reasons we have laboratories dedicated to certain kinds of software as well. So again, the largest chunk of money here goes to actually funding the network access you have, plus the people who keep that access going. Then the second, very secondarily, would be actually buying computers. That's really low cost today compared to other things. But there's a lot of software that you make use of, and maybe you don't use it all, maybe you don't use it all. In total, there's a lot of software out there. We pay license fees that let the entire university community benefit from that software as opposed to only a few students in one classroom. office, things like that, for example, used by most offices. So that's kind of that particular question. Going back to your question, which is more philosophical, I think, in nature. Let me just ask this question. There are quite a few things in life that require a collective will to provide. My children aren't in school right now, but I pay a very hefty amount of property taxes for school. Should I not do that? That's the kind of question I ask. I've had students come to me and say, why am I paying a fee for transportation on my bus? Well, if you didn't have that fee, the bus would be there. We could afford it. So we have to have dedicated revenue streams to be able to invest in certain high-cost items, like buses, or parking garages. And so if we don't have a broad base in which that revenue comes, we couldn't have it all. And so that's just a philosophical issue. I call it buy by the inch, which sounds good, but you don't have anything because of that lack. It's a problem. So long ago, we and many other parts of government made decisions to levy taxes, collect fees, that only some people actually did it directly, but the results of which are available to all people if they want. And that's sort of a philosophical issue in government that goes beyond the university completely, and one that probably should be debated in other places besides here. So I'm not here to debate that with you tonight. I'm saying that there are many fees like this, the rec fee. Why should you pay the rec fee? Yeah, we wouldn't have a building if we weren't paying that fee. That's the way. So that's the kind of choice we have to make here at the university. And ultimately, most of those fees have been authorized by you in some respects. Not all, but some of them. Not the rec fee was voted on by the students. The MSC, the students voted here to support a pretty major fee that is paying to debt service that went into renovating the MSC. Nobody makes you go there, and you may never go there. That's what most of you do, but we could have done that without that particular action being taken. So there's a whole bunch of things we have to do here at Texas A&M, in Texas, in the United States, that require a dedicated revenue stream to go there. And without that stream of revenue, we wouldn't have that particular thing. Now, we do also have many things that are user-based. You have a lot of fees on your bill that you're using this course. The money is going right to that course. And so on the academic side of the house, we've never touched those particular fees. They're allocated to specific things that you uniquely are doing, you're doing uniquely, and so on. But there's just so many services here that we have to have the economy of scale, and we have to have a dedicated revenue stream to be able to supply them that we can predict. Because we take on debt to be able to actually have the revenue then in place to pivot it back is essential. And that's just a philosophical issue of what you want out of government, out of a university, out of anything which is a public good structure.
Just to follow up, at what point does a service become popular enough to be transformed into a fee on all students? If, for example, all students in college eat, does that mean that the university is obligated to provide free meal plans well, not free meal plans, but to charge every single student for a meal plan and provide them with that service?
Yeah, we went to this discussion a couple of years ago. The then dining services came to me and they really wanted to look at the mandatory meal plan to be phased in over time. And again, it comes down to the same situation. What do you want? If we depended on purely retail sales of food or purely optional access to these things, what does that mean? It may mean you wouldn't have quite a few of the services on campus we have right now. The outsourcing we just did to Charwell, the dining services here, was predicated in part on their knowledge we were phasing in a dedicated fee that was going to be mandatory for all on-campus students. And that was a major factor in their decision to actually bid on this and provide some benefits to the university to deal with the privilege. So again, philosophical question, what do you really want? Do you want to have the ability to dine on campus or not? Do you want to have that ability to be predictable? as far as the cost of it is concerned. If the vendor depended on just retail sales here, it would probably change radically the pricing structure of the vendors in place. And they'd probably be really reluctant to invest in facilities required for dining and then the long-term support of facilities in terms of equipment maintenance, those kind of things. For example, Chartwell's is going to spend how much money on the towers?
Well, it's 25 million overall, I'm not exactly sure.
They're going to spend $25 million
I'm not.
on dining fitness. And I think the Commons is probably the biggest piece of it. If you've been down there, it needs pizza now. They can do that because they can predict the income they have. They can predict the kind of facility they have to pay back. Comes back the same problem with buses and things like that. So it's really just a fundamental issue of predictability of income. And if you don't have that, it's not to say the service wouldn't be there, but the nature of the service, the cost of the service might be very different than you might expect. I made a decision about 2 years ago, roughly, I think, on the services issue. We did it with a great deal of student consultation. There was opposition, there was support. It wasn't clear cut. There was also a matter of analysis of the needs of dining services to support the student population, what they'd have to have in terms of revenue to be able to make that happen. So it was a calculation that wasn't simple. And we elected to do it in a way that we thought minimized the impact. It was not immediately. I did it 2 years ago, and it became effective. So it will be applied each year as the class progresses through the 4 years here at Texas A&M. And so the intent was not to shock students who are currently in place. Probably no one here is paying a fee right now. Is there a freshman in the room? You're paying, one person's paying the room here. Thank you for that. And so again, it's a matter of what expectations there are. We also looked across the country at other universities. We found this to be a more common model was out. Again, it wasn't easy. I hesitated a long time before I did this particular decision because I felt there was great division in the House, shall we say. Ultimately, I felt that we had to provide a dedicated revenue stream that would allow dining services to make the investments required in the MSC, for example, and other locations on campus to give you a quality place to eat and have the equipment we need to have serve you and those kind of things. So if you depend on the idiosyncrasy of retail sales, you take on more risk. And because of the nature of the university being a place where only some students actually live, we only have about 10,000 beds here, and there are 50,000 of these, so there's a big gap there. We felt we had to make some choices about how we maintain services on campus. But we would have probably closed down at least one dining hall, August at least, if we did not have this type of dedicated fee going forward. And probably other services would suffer as well. We have a very different model for how you acquire food here in terms of purely retail sales, which might have been more expensive for you than other ways. So it's a judgment call. I made a decision, I'm responsibility for it, but it's never an easy choice. But we felt by doing it for the future, kids coming here down the road and phasing in over 1 year at a time going forward, would minimize the impact on students. They would know up front, and we need to make a decision based on that. It wasn't imposed on you, for example, who's already here in the university enrollment system. Having a decision.
I had a question, and I feel like we should probably, after this, like, try to ask some other of these index card questions, because we got to keep them in line. But my question dealt mainly with how, moving forward, this university advancement fee, because normally the fee process in the past has been for the heads of each department to come to us as the student council and present what additional services they need to offer in exchange for a fee increase. So I'm assuming that, okay, so in years, like since I've been in student government, which is becoming a very long time,
Term limits, right?
Yeah. The way it has always worked is, say for instance, the IT department wanted a fee increase to provide additional services. They needed they needed to expand our inboxes or whatever, things they have done. And I'm very happy that they have done those things. But they would come to us and say, this is how much additional money we need, this is what we want to provide in exchange, and basically give us what we need to take a position on that. So is there any intention, at least in the short term meaning next 5 years or so, to increase this university advancement fee? And if so, how is that process going to work?
Well, the fee would be increased based on recommendations from what the TFAC we have as part of this council. That's the process we use here. We have a tuition fee advisory committee, or something council now called, within this larger council. And in the past, that type of process has been used for every single increase in fees done. And so that would be the same issue here. If the judgment of this council is that we need to have an increase in this fee to provide the level of services you want across the board, it would be a recommendation committee to me, to me, the board of regents. So that's the way it's been. It won't change. What's changing is there's one fee and not 13, but the process will be exactly the same as we've had in the past.
Can I just add to that? I think one of the other benefits to this strategic budgeting council is that it's, I hate to use this word, but it's taking a holistic approach. TFAC just kind of had blinders on, and they said, okay, these are the areas that have the ability to raise income. And yet, you know, I've got the College of Architecture over here who may have a tremendous need. They have no ability to raise any fees because their money is coming from a combination of state funding, tuition, and AUF, for example. So what this budgeting council is going to do is it's going to bring all of these resources together so that when this university as a whole decides what the priorities are, we have every available resource at our discretion. And we're not limited because there was a fee that was created back in 1997 that said $50 from every student goes to support the bursar. If we feel that Wi-Fi is more important and we need that $50 that student is contributing to go to computer services on this campus, then we can do that now without what am I trying to say? Without any restrictions on those fees.
And you have everything to look at.
Yeah, you have everything to look at. You have the state appropriations to look at. You have the statutory tuition. You have designated tuition. You have the university advancement fee. You have every resource available to this university when this council is looking at trying to identify how to allocate its resources. In the past, what we've done is there's been this pool of, $122 million that we had no discretion over. It went to wherever the fee statute said it had to go to. Even though we had to sustain a $39 million or almost a $40 million cut in state appropriations, we couldn't take any of that money and backfill the academic programs on this campus. So all we're trying to do with this new university advancement fee is provide more flexibility, make the strategic budgeting decisions more broadly with more strategic, a more strategic look. Does that make any sense?
It does, and I guess where I'm going with that though is that increases to this, I mean, are probably going to be proposed. And so what is the functional difference between a $50 increase in the university advancement fee and a $50 increase in tuition? I mean, it seems to me like increases in tuition are kind of forbidden almost politically and just by the regents and and things that have happened, people have been very hesitant to do those. So is what this is all adding up to just kind of an almost backdoor way of getting more money and filling those tuition gaps, but not calling it a tuition increase? Because that's what it's looking like to me, and I think.
There's no more money being asked for. This is, the fee is replacing 13 existing fees. All this is buying us is the ability to allocate dollars more strategically and carefully across the university. If we raise the fee in the future, we will be done the same way we've done fees in the past, by having it originated by the TFAC, as it is called now, or the TPAC, or the Fee Advisory Committee, and going through the same steps. So again, there was no increase in your costs except for 2 specific fees that were increased before this new fee was created. And otherwise, the cost has been completely neutral in terms of change. So I mean, that's all I can say to you. It was strictly done to give us more flexibility to manage our money better than we could without this change. And we've always had the ability to go forward and ask for tuition increases and fee increases. We will retain that ability going forward. That's not changing. And the process will be exactly the same as it's been before for many years. So I understand what you're saying, I think. And the only thing that really is important here in your comments about the tuition fee connection here is the flexibility of this new fee is similar to, not the same as, the flexibility tuition dollars. But there's been no more tuition or fees asked of you, except for the 2 small increases granted by the board prior to the acquisition of this new fee.
So could one of y'all give an example, though, of a difference in the flexibility of tuition dollars versus university advancement fee dollars? So like what is something that could be put in one and not the other?
Flexibility is garnered because we reduced the 13 fees that had legislative restrictions to them. That's the new flexibility, Scott.
I understand that it is much more flexible than the mishmash of fees that we had before, but what makes it different from tuition? So we've got the $3,000 or however much it is, I'm kind of making that number up. I don't know exactly, like however much we paid in tuition, we've got another $1,500 we pay for university advancement fee, say. So what makes that $3,000 different from the $1,500?
There's not really a lot of difference. Not really. I mean, I've got a resource that comes from the state, and I can use it for academic, initiatives on this campus. We have AUF. We can basically use that for the same thing. I mean, it's just, higher education is full of different sources of money. So there's not really a whole lot of difference.
So for all intents and purposes, the university advancement fee is a second tuition bill, almost. It's
a fee. It's created in the fee statute to do any and all things necessary to support this university. Why does the legislature distinguish tuition from a fee? I can't tell you that. I just can tell you that legally there are 2 separate citations, and that's what we're doing. I mean, we're charging you so much under one citation and charging you what we legally and what the board is approved under tuition.
Thanks.
I have another question from the audience, and we might have to follow up on this, but I know we kind of already talked about it, and it starts with section 54, subsection 3, tuition on tuition and the charges to be authorized by law. And this is part of the Texas law. It says no institution of higher education may collect from students attending the institution any tuition fee or charge of any kind except as permitted by law, and no student may be refused admission to or discharged from any institution for the non-payment of any tuition fee or charge except as permitted by law. And the student goes on to ask, can you tell me what law authorized the student success fee, or lead me to someone who does know?
Section 5516, Texas Education Code.
Thank you.
question. Okay, so regarding the tuition and this, I know, I'm under the impression there are certain scholarships that only cover tuition. So if, instead of having this fee, we would have increased tuition, would you also have to increase scholarships from federal government or the state?
Most scholarships, I can't speak for all, most grants and scholarships use the term tuition and fees. Now, there may be some exceptions, I'm not aware of any, you know, wrong person speaking, Joe's not here.
Yeah, we go ahead and body the.
We have an expert not here, unfortunately. We get the answer for you, but normally the ones I've dealt with make no distinction between the tuition and mandatory fees up to the amount scholarship actually provides. Obviously, there's limits to what kind of provided here. That's true certainly of GI Bill benefits for veterans. It's true of the Pell Grants, which are federally provided. So I'm pretty certain that almost all of the ones we have here are. Now, there are a handful that are very special. I got one myself. I came here. I got a tuition scholarship. I came here with just for tuition. And so there are a handful that are granted that may be limited to tuition only. That's a possibility. And that may be one reason, in fact, Scott, that there's maybe some extensions sometimes. But the bulk of our scholarships that we hand out each year from various sources, Texas Grant, for example, doesn't distinguish those two at all. So the bulk, I believe, are transparent, whether it's fees, mandatory fees or tuition. But I know we have a few of our own scholarships we get out here that may be tuition limited. They're usually fairly small, but they cover tuition or tuition only. We have a few things we talk about, like the Academy Promise, where we actually have a requirement, or some post requirement that we have a family with a $60,000 or less annual income according to FERPA. We provide them with a free tuition, combining with the resources we put together. That is probably tuition there as well. So there probably are some of these that are tuition only. But we certainly asked Jerry Hutter to be much better look because he's the expert.
Okay, so if we had not created this fee and had increased the tuition, it would have affected those people?
Those particular ones, were there tuition only scholarships or grants and scholarships?
I have one that was out of the box here. So I was told when paying my fees for this semester that this was not a new fee for replacing 13 old fees. Why was I told that this is not a new fee? Where is the transparency? I understand you say this semester it will go to the 13 fees, but why was I not told the whole story?
I'm not sure there's no other person that, but if that was told by university employees, they were incorrect. Ms. Crane provided exactly the terminology. I put out a commissioner's aid email about that about this as well. We've got a website posting as well. The website. We try to be pretty careful about communicating. Over the course of the summer, I met repeatedly as a group of staff with SGA leadership to make sure they knew about the process. We were developing the whole thing over the summer. But they were told this by a university employee that was incorrect, obviously.
Okay, this is another question. I think that was already answered. For a student. Sorry, so since monies and many management are being somewhat combined, and these boards are largely comprised of students with individual needs and feelings, how are we mitigating the potential problem of unpopular, but to some very critically important funding choices being phased out by majority rule? Example, seat services used by minority groups with ethnic or disability characteristics.
Please.
Okay.
I think as the students are placed on these councils, they know that their role is not a role as a student. Their role is representing the organization, whether it be student government, whatever. So they need to leave their personal issues outside the door when they come into one of these committee meetings. And they're representing the student body of this university. Now, I can't say that that happens 100% of the time, but I've seen the students that are represented on these committees, and they're all, I mean, all of them that I have seen understand that they're representing the whole student body or their student group, whichever it is, whether it be the Corps of Cadets, student government, athletics, Greeks, whatever. They understand that they're representing that body and not their own personal interests.
Thank you. I do have another question. It's finance related, but it's more student services, but I'll go ahead and try asking it. I was just informed that University Dining tweeted that dining orders are no longer accepted at Ratner's and the convenience stores. Is that something that is true?
That's an issue, it's just resolution, you'll talk about that.
Yes, the C stores have been awarded, we have a brand new contract. In fact, they're taking over tomorrow morning. It's actually this, we had a little bit of a disconnect on Rocco's coming in. At one point, they were going to assume management of the C stores. They are not going to be assuming management. So Rattlers is moving back in first thing in the morning, and they have made the decision not to use dining dollars. What they will be doing is reducing their prices. Because as you know, you would go in and use dining dollars, you would get a little bit of a discount. So the vendor, the Rattlers vendor has committed to reducing their prices of their merchandise.
Did we accept the contract knowing that they were going to no longer accept dining dollars?
I don't know that's really never been part of the contract in years past. They've done it. Dining dollars is never written into the contract. In prior years, the C-store contract, the convenience store contracts has been a part of dining services. Now that dining services is outsourced, the C-stores is an independent contract with the university. So that match with dining dollars no longer exists.
Thank you.
Here's another question that we got. What other purposes are you intending on using these reallocated fees for? And how will students directly see these dollars being spent? As in, will the fees stay with student services or go to a research type area where students don't directly see where their fees are going to?
We pretty well responded to that already. The fees are going where they used to go right now. There's the same amount of money, I should say, going used to go right now. And any changes will be completely communicated to everybody who wants to know. I don't see an issue that seems to be all answered.
And I would argue that a lot of students are in the research side of the university. We've got a lot of grad students and activities surrounding our research programs that do benefit the students.
We have, I'm back to the research here, we also have 10,000 registrants, which are part of your student organization, so it's not deserved to have. But the fees are not, again, fee income is not general supporting research. It's supporting, again, the types of services we talked already. IT, which has a research function, obviously. The library research function, obviously. But it's not just for that purpose. So I'm not quite sure I understand the nuance of the question. Exactly why they're making this distinction. Happy to educate.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have any. Are we through all the?
Yes, Chris. We don't have any more for those, so but Chris has no questions.
Yes. I'm actually done asking you about the student service fee, or the student success fee. So since this is a legislative year for the Texas legislation, what kind of things will the university be lobbying for, pursuing in this upcoming legislation? Mostly in the area of finances, but maybe anything else you're kind of excited about.
We just had last week hearings here on campus with the legislative board staff, so this is pretty fresh. I submitted, when was it? Submitted back in August? Probably August, for August. We submitted our biannual request for appropriations. This is something we do every 2 years. and outlined there we wanted. We advised the legislature would be very good if they would restore the funds that were taken away last time. But at the very least, we wanted to make sure that the formula that funds most of our educational operations here is not further diminished. That was kind of a number one request for us. Number two request was that the Web Knowledge Fund, which supports the research universities in Texas, be restored. It was reduced by 25% in the last session. We asked for that to be restored back to its original amount. We asked for funding for a new facility here on campus, that service for a new facility, which would service veterinary medicine, animal science, and other programs here that require certain levels of biocontainment for the kinds of research and education that we do. Those are kind of the really big asks we put forward at this particular time. Anything else come to mind? See anyone else do those three big asks? And there were some discussions about some specific policy issues. I'll mention one. Is there a veteran in the room? Anybody a veteran? Veterans in the room? Texas has a specific law called the Hazelwood Act that requires that Texas universities provide free tuition to veterans. That tuition support comes after the GI Bill is applied. It's a federal program. And so the cost to Texas A&M students that is used to subsidize this has been pretty nominal for a long time. However, 4 years ago, the legislature changed the law to allow a veteran to assign that benefit to their dependents, a child or spouse, which is fine. I mean, these people suffer too from deployments, things like that. However, the dependents don't get GI benefits, and so all the burden falls on the university to fund this particular amount. So it went from $1 million a year to $10 million a year almost overnight. And you're paying that basically through the tuition you pay right now. Subsidize these particular individuals. Nothing wrong with that issue as long as it's understood. And we were concerned that no one, when this bill was passed, really understood the magnitude of the impact it's making. It'll probably be 15 million next year. It could be as high as 20 million beyond that. So we're very worried about the growth of this program. We've alerted the legislature to this particular issue and asked them to consider finding alternative ways to pay for this as opposed to having reallocation of student tuition dollars from one student to another to be able to do for this issue. That was kind of another, not a direct money matter, but a policy issue we felt they should address basically. It's legislative at this time. So that's maybe a bit of a red flag to some people because some veterans view this as an attack on their benefits, which I don't view it as that. I think we should be transparent about this and say that this has been an unexpected kind of cost to universities and their students to have this change occur without understanding how much it would then take to really fund the program.
So are you going to be lobbying to either get rid of it or get more funding from the state for it?
I can't lobby the law.
Are y'all going to be trying to get more?
We have asked the legislature to consider providing a way to fund this independently of the universities doing it with their own tuition dollars. Okay. And we've been talking about, and we're not the only one, every university has the same problem. This is not just Texas A&M, all of us have the same problem. We're just one of the biggest universities with the biggest veteran and veteran dependent group. And so the cost to us is probably the largest in Texas. But other smaller universities have some costs as well, which are affecting them. And we just felt, at the very least, we have to make this visible so people knew about it and can make a deliberate decision on how to be funded going forward. There are a bunch of these kinds of things in the law. We're required to provide free tuition to firefighters, to valedictorian special classes, to deaf people, and so on. You can name a whole bunch of things like that. Over time, we've been passed as laws that apply to certain people. And there are usually not many people that fall in these categories. It's not been a big deal. But this particular one has been a big deal because of the size of the number. We went from 0 to 1,000 people that were dependents in 4 years. So that's just a huge impact right
there. Can the Hazelwood exemption apply to situation that it would not apply to the university investment fee?
It applies to all mandatory costs.
All mandatory costs.
So see, right now for a veteran, the GI Bill, which applies to all costs, comes first. So we seldom have to fund a true veteran, except when they exhaust their GI Bill benefits. They go to school long enough to exhaust their benefits, which doesn't happen a lot. So that's why it was a minimal amount of money. It wasn't a big deal to us at all. But see, the dependents don't have that GI Bill benefit. So it's all being borne by the university, hence by you. And that's just a problem. And we thought we had to make people aware of that and begin to talk about how we can find other ways to deal with this issue. Again, I'm not disparaging a veteran or dependents in any way. They pay a huge price for defending our nation, and both those who go to war and go overseas, but those who stay behind too. And so I'm not at all worried about denying them this coverage. How do you pay for it? Question.
I have a question. Does this only cover their undergrad education or also
They can
professional?
cover graduate studies as well. They have a certain, the GI Bill, I believe it has what applies to grad students too, is that correct? GI Bill does. But again, the GI Bill covers a certain amount. So some people do get into Hazelwood because they go to grad school and exhaust their undergrad. The GI Bill benefits and Hazelwood kicks in later on.
I have a question. I know you mentioned in the past and asked if one of the reasons for that you give for the university advancement fee, that we have money elsewhere from fees that could be used somewhere else. My question is there a possibility, in your opinion, that we can find some of that money and whatever the university doesn't use for a different program, to decrease the university advancement fee from the students' bills?
I'm happy to do that. If we can find other ways to do this, I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, we are right now constrained by traditional revenue streams. The university is basically funded by three revenue streams right now. We're funded by tuition fees. We're funded by the income from auxiliary operations. That's the dining services you pay for, housing you pay for on campus, those kinds of things. And we're funded by income from endowments. The university fund and our local endowment here together, $7 billion, something like that. $7 billion. And so the income from that helps offset the cost of your education. And UT Austin, other schools don't get that benefit. And so that is a wonderful way. And that's one reason your tuition is lower here than at UH, Texas Tech, places like that. Obviously, you enjoy a lower tuition than many other schools in Texas. UT Dallas, U of H Tech, with Arlington. There are about five schools more expensive in Texas than we are. And they aren't schools that are quality in my opinion. Okay, so one of the reasons we can do that is because of the income from the university fund. It helps pay for the educational costs here. And without that, we'd have to have a much higher tuition, about the same level of service. So those are the three areas right now we derive money from. Along with state support appropriations. So tuition fees, appropriations, and earnings from our endowments. Those are the three main sources. If appropriations are going down, which seems to be the case, they run on a long time on a first year basis. If it's politically not feasible to increase tuition in a reasonable amount, what's left? We have to find ways to do it. So the two things we're doing are trying to be much more efficient in operations here. We're already the most efficient university in Texas in terms of our administrative costs. We spend 4% of our budget administration. The state average is over 10. So it gives you a sense of how efficient Texas is. Texas is over 5%, and most universities are around 8 to 12. And so we are very efficient from the standpoint of our administrative costs and anybody else in Texas. But outsourcing is one area we looked at recently, obviously. We have spent a fair amount of money on making us more energy efficient, which we recouped through savings, which is passed on to you. this university is spending much less money per square foot today than 10 years back. We invested in very efficient systems with reduced energy costs here, and we were trying to also comment to you over time and give you knowledge about how to save money for your actions, your behaviors, and so on, what you turn on and off, and things like that. So we'll be working hard on that going forward as well to try to get behavioral savings as well built into this. So you do the best you can with all these efficiencies. But the final thing I can do, I do every day, is go out there and raise more money for the private side. Try to get more endowment money for us, and we have more income from endowment, and therefore reducing the need for the other revenue streams we have. That's a slow process. We will start fairly soon a youth capital campaign. Probably be able to announce early next year the target we have for that. The last campaign we ran several years ago, the target was $1 billion, we raised $1.5 billion. So that was helpful. Some of that money is wills and trusts and so on that we hear today, tomorrow, but also they become part of the university's endowment and be able to offset the costs. So that's out there. We'll work hard on this new campaign as well beginning next year, and my hope is it'll be raising some good dollars over time and be able to continue to reduce the dependency on other students. But these are all long-term things. We don't solve the problem tomorrow.
Do we have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna allow Chris to, if you all have any questions. I'm gonna allow Chris to have the final question for the meeting.
Do you want a final question?
I think it's getting close to time.
Okay,
let me
what's a bedtime?
Okay, I'll go with this one. Kind of going back to the university interacting with the Texas legislature, what will the administration's position on set-aside tuition be in this legislative session?
Well, I'm not sure we have it this year. Right now, state law requires us to set aside 20% of increases in tuition to fund need-based scholarships. We haven't increased tuition in 2 years, so there's been no change in that particular amount of money dedicated to that source for a while now. It won't be for a while. And so it may be an issue that others will bring up. We don't have a plan behind to bring it up ourselves as the university officially. Because it is state law right now, we don't have a position on that particular law. Yeah, it's one of those areas of lobbying I'm going to be very careful what I say. What I'm allowed to do legally is to propose appropriation requests and defend those requests. Other areas I have to be very careful when I say as a state employee I'm not allowed to lobby. You can lobby if you have a license, or you can at least talk to legislators about those things. But we have to really be careful about how we do things. So we educate legislators, basically. And I am allowed to, again, propose and defend appropriation requests. But this isn't quite the same thing. This is a state law that's been in place for quite some time that we have honored, obviously, and that we haven't had no increase of that for a while because, again, tuition, as I said, 20% of the tuition dollars, designated tuition, do go towards a fund that provides need-based scholarships right now. That's just the way the law is. Maybe do anything with that? Yes. We have no official position in the university on this particular issue.
Dr. Loftin, thank you so much. Just a reminder to the finance committee, we have one bill to get out of committee.
I'm still going with student process.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
You already said you want some of those. I'll be wearing them, but never said you get slides. Oh, this is fine. I gave him lots of these to get some free things. I was like, yeah. But he's like, I read something. It's out.